Good morning, Class 8D. It is March 26, 2020, and our lesson topic for today is going to be about the Great Migration. So let's start off with the first slide and our focus question for our lesson. What was the Great Migration and what caused this migration? So when we're referring to the Great Migration, we're talking about how African Americans in the South during the turn of the century between 1910 to 1930 decided that living in the South was not in their best interest, and they decided to migrate north into cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia in order to find a better life. So in this lesson, we're going to progress through to figure out what were some of the causes for the Great Migration, and what were some of the benefits and or the pros and cons of leaving the South. So let's click on to the next slide. And you have a do now. I'm actually going to post the do now with the assignment. So when you answer the do now question, you're going to post it on the stream underneath the assignment. So the question is, you're looking at two pictures here. Okay, you have a painting on top, and then you have an actual photograph on the bottom, which looks like a lot of African Americans at some kind of station. So you're gonna perform the what I see, what I think, and what I wonder. Okay, so what do you see? What do you see between these two pictures? What do you think is happening between these two pictures? And what do you wonder? Is that the asking question part? Okay. Uh, so you can pause this part of the video so you could take a closer look and analyze the picture. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, the Great Migration. So many African Americans left the South during World War I and moved north to work in primarily factories that produce war materials. Some of these factories were shifted from making war materials, and they started to do other technologies like building cars or building ships. But the thing was is that a lot of these jobs needed to be filled, and a lot of companies from the north, because a lot of white Americans were joining the war, they started to recruit down south and started to entice African Americans to come up north to fill these jobs. So this movement of African Americans from the south to the north in the early 1900s is going to be known as the Great Migration. So I want to pause here quickly before we go to the next slide. The difference between immigration and migration. Sometimes we kind of get that a little confused. So immigration is when you have someone that lives in a different country and then moves to another country. So an example of that would be someone who lives in Europe, let's say Italy, and decides that they want to leave Italy and live now in the United States. That Italian immigrated from Italy to the United States. When we say the word migration, migration is internal. African Americans who were living in the United States or southern United States moved from one location to another location within the United States. That is called migration. Okay, so I want to make sure and emphasize the difference between the two. Let's go to the next slide. So in the Great Migrations, we're going to see within this humongous movement within African American communities, close to over 6 million African Americans leave the rural South, the countryside of the South, working in plantations and huge farms, and they decided to go to places like the Northeast, the Midwest, and the West. So our second bullet point, places like New York, Philadelphia, and Cleveland are places in the Northeast. We live in New York, so this region would be considered Northeast. Places like Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, and Indianapolis are considered Midwest. They're kind of located centrally and in the middle of the map of the United States. And when we talk about West, we're talking primarily California. Okay? This becomes the largest internal movement of an American population. Right? Overall, close to 6 million African Americans leave the South and decide to go to many places within the Northeast, Midwest, and the West. A good portion of why they're leaving is due to Jim Crow laws that are being set in the South. The lack of job opportunities. Remember that white Americans are still controlling a majority of the jobs in the South, not to mention that they're making laws. So that would be another reason why African Americans wanted to move. And the last thing, but unfortunately, is the lynching that is going on. And we went over this word previously. Lynching is the illegal death of a particular person. So a lot of lynching was going on in the South. It didn't matter if an African American actually committed a crime or not. A lot of them didn't. They would pull those individuals, take them to the streets, and they would kill them. All right, we talked about this before. Some of the methods could be hanging, shooting, burning. So a lot of African Americans that lived in the South had a huge fear of being killed while living in the South. And that became a major reason why they wanted to live in the North, because in the North, a lot of white Americans were very accepting of African Americans. However, it wasn't that they didn't face discrimination. They still faced discrimination in the North, but they had a much easier time and being able to be accepted within those particular areas. So I wanted to show you a bar graph, and just to give you an idea of the impact of how populations actually grew during this time frame. So in this slide here, we look at Newark's population. That's Newark, New Jersey, which is that's the state that's right next to New York. If you look down here in the bar graph in 1870, you'll see that closely around 100,000 people were living in Newark, New Jersey. If we fast forward to 1920, we see that the population jumped from 100,000 to over 400,000, probably around 410 to 420,000. That's a pretty big jump. If we kind of, next slide, we'll see the difference in the African American population, same place in Newark, New Jersey. In 1870, we see roughly around 2,000 African Americans living in Newark. And if we fast forward into 1920, we have about 17,000 African Americans that are living in Newark, New Jersey at 1920. So you see that there's a big, significant jump between 2,000 to 17,000 within a matter of a couple of decades. All right. So once you are done viewing the PowerPoint slide that I gave you, attached to your assignment will also be a video, a YouTube video, that all you have to do is click on the link and it will give you more information about the Great Migration. So let's take a look at the document that you'll be working on to fulfill your assignment. So in the document, not only are you looking at the video and you're looking at the Great Migration video, the PowerPoint video, you'll also be given two documents. Document one kind of gives you a snapshot of what kind of life African Americans were living in the South. Please go ahead and read the captions that come along with the document. In document two, you're going to see that these are kind of like newspaper clippings, and these newspaper clipping or ads that were in at the time were kind of like letting people know that they needed workers, and these type of ads were given to African Americans in order to let them know that there were jobs that were going to pay them. And even this one, if we look at this particular clipping, 25 girls wanted for kitchen work and dishwashing, salary $7 per week, and board. So I just want to explain what board means, because you're going to hear this term a lot when you get older. and you want to go away for college, you'll hear the term room and board. Room is just that, you getting a room. Board is the food that you're going to consume. So in this ad here, the person who wants these women to work in the kitchen is willing to pay them $7 a week and feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So once you analyze these two documents, you have 4 questions to answer based on everything that I've given you. The PowerPoint slides, the video that you're going to watch about the Great Migration, and also these 2 documents. Go ahead and answer the 4 questions. You can go ahead and write your answers on the document itself, save it, and then upload it into Google Classroom. If you're still having trouble with technology, if for some reason when you open this file and you can't type on it, then go ahead and directly type onto Google Classroom, type your answers out, and then post them on the stream. Okay. Worst case scenario, you can write your answers on a notebook paper, take a picture of the notebook paper, and then send it to me or post it on Google Classroom. Anyway, class, that is going to be the end of the video, and I will talk to you on Friday.